The cabin was exactly where my dad said it would be. What he didn't mention were the fresh scratches around the door. I drove up to my family's cabin during what the news kept calling the storm of the decade. Looking back, I should have turned around the moment I saw how empty the highway was. But my dad had asked me to check on the place before the worst of it hit. Make sure the pipes were drained and the windows were sealed. He couldn't make the drive himself. Bad hip. Worse timing. So there I was, his only daughter, stupid enough to think I could beat the weather. The cabin sat about 40 miles outside of any real town, tucked into a dense stretch of pine forest that my grandfather had loved for its isolation. We'd spent summers there when I was younger, but I hadn't been back in nearly 3 years. The road leading up to it was barely maintained, and my sedan struggled through snow that was already 6 inches deep. By the time I pulled into the clearing, the sky had turned that particular shade of gray that meant business. I sat in the car for a moment, engine running, staring at the cabin. It looked smaller than I remembered. The porch sagged a little more. But what caught my attention were the locks. There were 2 of them now. Heavy-duty deadbolts that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. My dad hadn't mentioned adding new locks. I would have remembered that. He was meticulous about telling me every little repair he made to the place. The wind was already picking up, pushing snow sideways across the clearing. I grabbed my overnight bag and hurried to the porch, fumbling with the keys my dad had given me. The old lock turned fine, but the second one, the new one, felt stiff, like it had been used recently. Inside, the cabin smelled like pine and dust and something else. Something faintly sweet and chemical that I couldn't quite place. Everything looked normal at first. Same old furniture, same faded curtains, same stack of board games on the shelf that nobody had touched in years. But as I moved through the main room, I noticed little things. A coffee mug in the sink that wasn't there last time. I was sure of that because we always left the place spotless. A jacket hanging on the coat rack that I didn't recognize. Dark green and much too large to be my father's. When I touched it, the fabric was slightly damp. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe my dad had lent the cabin to a friend. Maybe he'd been up here more recently than I thought and just forgot to mention it. But my hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone to call him. No signal, of course. The cabin had never had good reception, and with the storm rolling in, I wasn't surprised. Still, the timing felt wrong. The wind outside was screaming now, rattling the windows in their frames. I went through the checklist my dad had given me, checked the pipes in the bathroom, made sure the wood stove was clear, tested the window latches. That's when I found the notebook. It was sitting on the small desk in the bedroom, opened to a page covered in handwriting I didn't recognize. The entries were dated, going back about 2 weeks. Most of it was mundane. Weather observations, notes about firewood supply, a grocery list. But the last entry, dated 3 days ago, just said she's coming on the 19th. Need to be gone by then. Today was the 19th. My stomach dropped. I read the line again, then flipped through the other pages. There were sketches, too. Rough drawings of the cabin's layout, the surrounding woods, the road I'd driven in on. One page had a list of times, each one marked with car passed or no movement. Someone had been watching the road, studying it. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at that notebook long enough for the room to grow noticeably darker. The storm had arrived in full force now. Snow piling up against the windows, wind howling through the eaves. I should have left right then. Should have run to my car and risked the drive back to civilization. but something kept me frozen. Maybe disbelief. Maybe the stupid hope that I was misunderstanding everything. That's when I heard it. A sound from somewhere above me. The cabin only had one floor, but there was a small attic space accessible through a hatch in the bedroom ceiling. We'd used it for storage when I was a kid. The sound came again, a soft, deliberate creak, like someone shifting their weight carefully. My breath caught in my throat. I stared up at the hatch. It was closed, same as always, but I could swear I saw a thin line of darkness around its edges that hadn't been there before. Another creak, then silence, just the wind and my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I backed out of the bedroom slowly, not taking my eyes off that ceiling hatch. In the main room, I grabbed the fireplace poker, the closest thing to a weapon I could find. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost dropped it. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to leave, but the storm outside sounded absolutely vicious now. I'd seen whiteout conditions before. Driving in this would be suicide. I tried my phone again. Still nothing. The cabin's old landline had been disconnected years ago. I was completely cut off. For the next hour, I sat on the couch, facing the bedroom door, poker across my lap, listening. The sounds from above had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every creak of the cabin settling, every gust of wind sent my nerves jangling. I kept replaying that notebook entry in my mind. She's coming on the 19th. Need to be gone by then. Whoever wrote that knew I was coming, knew the exact date. Around 8 p.m., the power went out. The cabin plunged into darkness, so complete it felt solid. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim light to find the emergency lantern we kept under the sink. The battery was low, but it would have to do. In its weak glow, the cabin looked different. Shadows stretched wrong. Familiar objects turned strange and threatening. I couldn't stay on the couch anymore. The bedroom, with its attic hatch, felt like a trap. So I moved to the small bathroom. It was the only room with a door I could lock from the inside, and it had no ceiling access. I wedged myself between the toilet and the wall, poker still in my hands, and tried to think clearly. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe the notebook belonged to a squatter who'd moved on. Maybe those sounds from the attic were just rats, or the storm, or the cabin settling. But I couldn't convince myself. Every instinct I had was screaming that something was very, very wrong. That's when I smelled it again. That sweet chemical odor I'd noticed when I first arrived. Stronger now. It was coming from under the door, seeping in with the cold air. I recognized it suddenly. Camp stove fuel. Someone was using a camp stove somewhere in the cabin. My whole body went rigid. I pressed my ear against the door, listening. Soft footsteps in the main room, slow, careful, moving toward the bathroom. They stopped just outside the door. I held my breath, poker raised, staring at the sliver of space between the door and the floor. A shadow moved across it. Whoever was out there was standing still now, just on the other side of the thin wooden door. I could hear breathing, not my own. Calm, steady breathing. A full minute passed, maybe two. Then, the footsteps moved away back toward the bedroom. I heard the bedroom door close. Then, nothing. I don't know how long I stayed in that bathroom. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough for the lantern battery to die completely, leaving me in absolute darkness. The storm continued to rage outside, and at some point, exhaustion won over fear. I must have dozed off, slumped against the wall. When I woke up, weak gray light was filtering under the door. Morning. The storm had passed. I could hear birds outside, the first normal sound in hours. My body ached as I stood up, poker still clutched in my stiff fingers. I pressed my ear to the door again. Nothing. Slowly, I unlocked it and eased it open. The cabin was empty. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The front door was wide open. Snow drifted halfway across the floor. And in that snow, leading from the bedroom to the door and then out into the woods, were footprints. Boot prints, much larger than mine. I ran to my car without bothering to close the cabin door behind me. The road was barely passable, but I didn't care. I drove like hell, sliding and fishtailing until I finally hit the main highway. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station with a working phone. When I called my dad, he swore he hadn't told anyone I was coming to the cabin. Swore he hadn't installed new locks or lent the place to anyone. He hadn't been there in over 2 months. He wanted to call the police, but I stopped him. What would I tell them? That someone might have been in the attic. That I found a notebook and smelled camp fuel. I had no proof of anything. I never went back to get my overnight bag. My dad had the locks changed again and went up there himself the following week with 2 of his friends. He said everything looked fine. No notebook, no strange jacket, no signs anyone had been there. But he did find something in the attic. He didn't want to tell me at first, but I pushed him. There was a sleeping bag up there, he said, still warm when he touched it, and next to it, a small pile of Polaroid photographs. All of them were pictures of the cabin's interior, taken from angles that suggested someone had been living in the walls or ceiling for a while. Different times of day, different seasons. In a few of them, you could see people through the windows. My family from years ago. Me as a teenager, reading on the couch. The last photo was different. It was taken from inside the bathroom, pointing at the door from the side I'd been sitting on just a few hours before my dad arrived. I woke up to find my driveway perfectly cleared. I live alone, 20 meters from town, and I didn't hire anyone. The blizzard hit on a Tuesday night, just like the weather service had been warning about all week. I'd prepared well enough, stocked up on food, filled the generator with gas, brought in extra firewood. Living alone in rural Vermont means you learn to be self-sufficient, especially during winter. I'd been in my house for 8 months by then. A small 2-bedroom I'd bought after my divorce. The isolation was exactly what I needed. I went to bed around 11, listening to the wind pick up and snow pelting against the windows. The weather report said we'd get anywhere from 18 to 24 inches overnight. I remember feeling satisfied with my preparations as I drifted off, almost looking forward to being snowed in for a few days with nothing but books and silence. When I woke up around 7, the storm had stopped. That particular quiet that comes after heavy snow, you know, the one where even the air feels muffled. I made coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the winter wonderland my property had become. My car was buried under a smooth white dome. The trees sagged under the weight of snow. Everything was pristine and untouched except my driveway. It had been plowed, not just plowed, cleared perfectly right down to the gravel. The snow was pushed into neat banks on either side, creating a clear path from my front door all the way to the main road, which itself was still completely unplowed. Someone had cleared just my driveway and nothing else. I stood there with my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, trying to make sense of it. I hadn't heard anything during the night, but the storm had been loud. Maybe the town had sent someone, but that didn't make sense. They'd never plowed private driveways before, and they certainly wouldn't do mine before clearing the main roads. Plus, I lived on a dead-end road with only 3 houses, and the other 2 were vacation properties that sat empty all winter. I grabbed my phone and checked for messages. Nothing. No missed calls, no voicemails, no texts from any friendly neighbor claiming they'd done me a favor. I didn't even know my neighbors. I'd chosen this place specifically for its isolation. I pulled on my boots and coat and went outside to investigate. The morning was brutally cold, that dry cold that makes your nostril hairs freeze. My breath came out in thick clouds. As I walked down the driveway, the plow work was professional, precise. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. I could see the scrape marks from the blade, all going in the same direction. They'd started at the road and worked their way up to my house. At the end of the driveway, where it met the unplowed road, I noticed something. Boot prints in the snow just off to the side. Large prints. Definitely not mine. They came from the tree line across the road, stopped at the edge of my property, then went back into the woods the same way. Someone had stood there watching my house, either before or after the plowing. A cold feeling settled in my stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature. I looked toward the trees where the prints led. The forest was dense there, all dark pines and shadows, even in daylight. I couldn't see anything moving, but I suddenly felt very exposed, standing in my cleared driveway. I went back inside and locked the door. Then I did something I hadn't done since moving in. I checked every window lock, every door, the basement hatch. Everything was secure. I told myself I was being paranoid. Someone had done me a favor. That's all. Maybe it was the previous owner, who'd seemed like a decent guy when we'd met for the closing. Maybe he still had a plow route in the area and added my place out of kindness. But that didn't explain the boot prints or why they do it in the middle of the night without mentioning it. I tried to work. I did freelance graphic design from home, one of the reasons I could live out here. But I couldn't focus. I kept getting up to look out the windows. The forest across the road bothered me. Those trees could hide anything, anyone. Around noon, I noticed something else. There were tracks in my backyard, not animal tracks. These were the same boot prints I'd seen at the end of the driveway, making a circuit around my entire house. They came from the woods behind my property, circled the house maybe 10 feet from the walls, then disappeared back into the trees. Whoever made them had walked around my house while I was sleeping, close enough to look in the windows if they wanted. My hands started shaking as I pulled out my phone. Still no cell service. The storm must have taken out a tower. The landline I'd had installed worked, but when I called the non-emergency police number, I got a busy signal. I tried 3 more times with the same result. The storm had probably caused emergencies all over the county. I was completely alone. The rest of that day crawled by. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I passed a window, I imagined someone standing just outside in the snow, staring in. I closed all the curtains, which helped a little, but also made the house feel like a cage. The sun set around 4:30, and the darkness came fast and total. Around 8 p.m., I was forcing myself to eat some soup when I heard it. An engine, not on the road, in my driveway. I rushed to the living room window and peeked through the curtain. A pickup truck was parked at the end of my driveway, headlights off, just sitting there idling. I couldn't see the driver through the glare of my porch light, but I could see the exhaust rising from the tailpipe into the cold air. The truck was dark-colored, maybe blue or black, with a plow blade attached to the front. My heart was hammering. I watched the truck for a full minute. It didn't move. The driver didn't get out. They just sat there, engine running, pointed toward my house. Then the truck's headlights flicked on, flooding my front yard with harsh white light. I jerked back from the window instinctively. When I looked again, the truck was backing up, turning around, driving away slowly down the unplowed road. I watched its taillights disappear into the darkness. I grabbed the poker from beside my fireplace and did another check of every lock, every window. Then I pushed my heavy bookshelf in front of the front door. It probably wouldn't stop anyone determined to get in, but it made me feel slightly better. I tried the police again, still busy. Sleep was impossible. I sat on my couch with all the lights on, poker across my lap, listening to every creak and groan of the house settling. Around midnight, I heard the truck again. Same spot in my driveway, same idling engine. This time, I didn't look out the window. I sat frozen on my couch, barely breathing, until the engine sound faded away again 10 minutes later. This happened 3 more times throughout the night. Each visit lasted a little longer than the last. When dawn finally came, I was exhausted and terrified and furious. I'd lived in cities before, dealt with crime and danger, but this was different. This was personal. Someone was deliberately terrorizing me, and I had no idea why. The roads were finally plowed by mid-morning. I heard the town truck go by. I threw my essentials into a bag and got in my car. I wasn't staying another night. As I backed down my perfectly cleared driveway, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a small orange flag stuck in the snowbank, the kind construction workers use, to mark utilities or property lines. I stopped and got out to look at it. Tied to the flag was a laminated piece of paper, the kind that wouldn't be destroyed by snow or water. It was a photograph, a picture of my house taken from the woods, showing my bedroom window. The curtains were open, and I could see myself inside, asleep in bed, based on the darkness outside and the lamp on my nightstand. It had been taken recently, maybe last night. On the back, written in black marker, were just 3 words: "You're still here." I dropped the photo and ran to my car. I didn't stop driving until I reached my sister's house in Massachusetts, 4 hours away. I called the police from there and told them everything. They sent someone to check my property. The officer said he found the photo where I dropped it, confirmed the boot prints, but there was no sign of forced entry or any crime being committed. He suggested I install security cameras and maybe spend a few more nights away until things calmed down. I never went back. I had friends pack up my things the following week, and I sold the house as is to a developer who wanted the land. I took a significant loss, but I didn't care. My realtor mentioned that the previous owner had been asking about the property, wanting to know if I was happy there. She thought it was sweet. I didn't tell her about the rest. Last month, 9 months after I moved out, I got a message on Facebook from a woman I didn't know. She said she'd just bought a house in rural Vermont and found something weird in the basement. Tucked behind the water heater was a box containing dozens of photographs of the property. Different angles, different seasons, different times of day. In some of the older photos, she could see the previous residents through the windows. Normal people doing normal things, making dinner, watching TV, sleeping. The newest photos in the box were of me. She wanted to know if I knew anything about them, if maybe they were part of some property documentation the previous owner had done. I told her to call the police, and then I blocked her. I didn't want to know anything else. But sometimes late at night, I wonder if someone's plowing her driveway too. 3. The emergency broadcast said to shelter in place. Then it started giving instructions I knew weren't official. I was driving back from a weekend photography trip when the storm hit about 90 miles from home, on a stretch of highway that cuts through nothing but farmland and forest. The weather had been fine all day, but around 5 p.m., the sky turned this ugly greenish gray and the temperature dropped fast. Within 20 minutes, I was driving through a complete whiteout. I should mention I'm careful about this stuff. I check weather reports obsessively, and I keep emergency supplies in my car. Blankets, water, protein bars, a first aid kit. But this storm came out of nowhere. Or at least nowhere the forecasters had predicted. 1 minute I could see fine. The next, I couldn't make out the road 10 feet ahead. The smart thing would have been to pull over immediately. But I was trying to make it to the next town, where I could wait it out in a warm diner or hotel. That decision almost killed me. I hit a patch of black ice going around a curve, and my car spun sideways, then slid off the road and down a shallow embankment. I wasn't hurt, just shaken. But when I tried to back up onto the highway, the wheels just spun uselessly in the snow. I was stuck. I tried my phone first. Obviously, no signal. The storm was really howling now, rocking my car with gusts of wind that sounded like freight trains. I'd passed a farmhouse, maybe 2 miles back, but walking in this weather would be suicide. I had no choice but to wait it out. I bundled up in my emergency blanket, ate a granola bar, and turned on the radio to see if I could get traffic or weather updates. Static on every station. I kept scanning, getting nothing but white noise and occasional fragments of music or voices that would cut in and out. Then around 6:30, I found a clear signal. A calm male voice was giving weather updates for the region. He confirmed what I already knew. Major blizzard, zero visibility, all roads closed. Then he said something that made me pay attention. If you are stranded in a vehicle, remain inside. Do not attempt to walk for help. Keep your engine running in intervals to preserve fuel, but crack a window to prevent carbon monoxide buildup. Most importantly, if someone approaches your vehicle, do not unlock your doors or roll down your windows. Wait for official emergency services who will identify themselves with proper credentials. That last part seemed oddly specific, but I figured there must be concerns about people getting robbed or carjacked during the chaos. It made me more aware of my surroundings. I was completely alone out here. Visibility was maybe 5 feet in any direction, and anyone could walk right up to my car without me seeing them coming until they were on top of me. I locked all the doors and settled in to wait. The radio voice continued giving updates and safety information. He repeated the warning about not opening doors for anyone. Then, he started describing the storm's movement, saying it would probably last another 6 to 8 hours before conditions improved enough for rescue operations. His voice was professional, reassuring. I found it comforting in a weird way. Around 7, the voice said something new. For those sheltering in vehicles on County Road 47 between mile markers 23 and 31, be advised that emergency services are aware of your locations. Do not leave your vehicles. If you see lights approaching, remain calm and wait for proper identification. My breath caught. I was on County Road 47, and according to the last mile marker I'd seen, I was around mile marker 27. The broadcast was talking directly about my location. But how would they know exactly where stranded vehicles were? I hadn't been able to call anyone. Maybe they were using traffic cameras or satellite data. That had to be it. I tried to relax, but something about the specificity made my skin crawl. The storm continued to rage. I ran the engine for 10 minutes every hour to keep warm, just like the radio voice had instructed. Each time I shut it off, the silence was oppressive. Just wind and the tick of cooling metal. I kept the radio on for company, and the voice kept broadcasting. Weather updates, safety tips, and every hour or so, another specific message about County Road 47. Vehicle locations confirmed at mile markers 24, 27, and 29. Remain in place. Help is coming. There were others out here. That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. The voice never said how many vehicles, never gave any details about the people inside them, just those cold clinical updates. Around 9:00 p.m., I saw lights. They appeared suddenly through the snow, maybe 30 yards ahead of me on the road, headlights moving slowly in my direction. My first instinct was relief. Finally, help had arrived. But then I remembered what the radio had said. Wait for proper identification. Don't open doors. I watched the lights approach. They were moving at walking pace, sweeping back and forth slightly, like someone was searching. When they got closer, I could make out the shape of a pickup truck, dark-colored and old. Not a police vehicle or ambulance. Just someone else who'd been caught in the storm, probably looking for shelter. The truck stopped about 20 feet from my car. The headlights pointed right at me, blinding. I couldn't see who was driving. The engine idled for maybe a minute, then shut off. The light stayed on. A door opened. I heard it slam shut, footsteps crunching in the snow, coming toward my car. My heart was pounding. The radio voice had been so insistent. Don't open doors for anyone. But this was probably just someone who needed help, right? Someone in the same situation as me. I reached for my door lock, then hesitated. The footsteps stopped right outside my driver's side window. I couldn't see anyone through the snow-covered glass. Then a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't respond. The radio was still playing softly, the voice now talking about temperature drops and wind chill factors. Another knock, harder this time. Hello? A man's voice muffled by the wind and glass. I saw your car. Are you okay in there? My mouth was dry. I'm fine, I called out, not opening the window, waiting for emergency services. Silence. Then your tailpipe is blocked with snow. Carbon monoxide will build up if you run your engine. Let me clear it for you. I hadn't thought about that. Was my tailpipe blocked? I couldn't tell from inside the car, and I didn't want to get out to check. But carbon monoxide poisoning was a real danger. I'll check it myself later, I said. Thank you. More silence. The footsteps moved away, crunching through the snow. I heard them circle around the back of my car, then stop. A scraping sound, like someone brushing snow away from something. Then the footsteps returned to my window. It was completely blocked, the voice said. You would have died if you'd run the engine again. You should thank me. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. I didn't respond. The footsteps moved to my passenger window, then the back doors like he was checking all of them, testing them. You should let me in, he said, back at the driver's window now. It's dangerous out here alone. We should stick together until help arrives. The radio chose that moment to speak up again, almost like it was responding to him. Do not open your doors. Emergency services will identify themselves with credentials and vehicle markings. If someone claims to be helping you, Ask to see identification through the window. Trust your instincts. I clutched my phone uselessly. Still no signal. The man outside was quiet now, but I could sense him there, just beyond my frost-covered window. "I know you can hear the radio," he said finally. His voice was different now, harder. "That's not an official broadcast. That's me. I've been telling you what to do all night." My stomach dropped. That was impossible. The voice on the radio was coming from a radio station. It had traffic updates, weather information, the whole thing. But even as I thought this, I realized I'd never heard any station identification, any ads, any music. Just that one calm voice giving instructions. "Check your radio," the man said. "What frequency are you on?" I looked down at my dashboard display with shaking hands. The radio showed 162.550 megahertz, a weather radio frequency. But weather radios were automated, just text-to-speech warnings. They didn't give specific instructions about not opening doors or mention exact mile markers. "That's a two-way radio frequency," the man said, like he could read my thoughts. "I can broadcast on it. I can also receive. I've been listening to you breathing in there. Heard you eating your granola bar. Heard you running your engine." I punched the scan button frantically. The radio cycled through stations. Static. Static. More static. Then it found the voice again on a completely different frequency. "There's no point in changing stations," the man outside said, his words matching the radio voice perfectly now. "I'm on all of them. This whole stretch of road. I control what you hear." I jabbed the power button, killing the radio entirely. The sudden silence was deafening. I sat there in the dark, my breath coming in quick gasps, trying to think. "You turned off the radio," the man said. "That's okay. We don't need it anymore. I'm right here." A scraping sound at my window. I jerked away instinctively. He was doing something to the glass. I couldn't see what through the snow and frost. Then I realized he was clearing away the snow and ice, making a small clear spot. His face appeared in the circle he'd made, just inches from mine, separated only by the glass. He was middle-aged, ordinary look, with kind eyes that didn't match the situation at all. He smiled. "I cleaned your tailpipe," he said. That part was true. Carbon monoxide is dangerous. I need you alive. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He kept smiling at me through the little window he'd made. "There are 3 other cars stranded on this road tonight," he said, "mile markers 24 and 29. I've already visited them. They listened to the radio. They didn't open their doors." He paused. Well, most of them didn't. He stepped back from the window, and I lost sight of him. I heard his footsteps moving away, back toward his truck. The engine started. The headlights swept across my car as he turned around. And for just a moment, I could see the bed of his pickup. There was something back there, covered with a tarp. The shape was wrong, too irregular. The lights moved away, and I was left in darkness again. His truck drove past me slowly, heading back the way he'd come, toward mile marker 24. I watched his taillights fade into the snow until they disappeared. I sat there shaking for maybe 10 minutes before I dared to turn my radio back on. I needed to know if anyone was broadcasting real emergency information. I needed to know if anyone even knew we were out here. The radio crackled to life, static on every frequency. Then, cutting through the white noise, a voice, different than before, younger, panicked. "Anyone can hear this. Please help. I'm at mile marker 24 on County Road 47. There's someone outside my car. He won't leave. He keeps saying he can help, but I don't. The voice cut off abruptly. Just static again. I changed frequencies. Another voice. Older female. Also terrified. Been circling my car for 20 minutes. Says he has a radio. Says he's been talking to emergency services, but I don't believe him. If anyone can hear this, send help to mile marker. Static. I turned the radio off and sat in the dark, too scared to move. The storm howled around my car. I have no idea how long I waited before I saw lights approaching again. This time, from behind me. Official lights, red and blue. Cutting through the snow, a police SUV pulled up beside my car and an officer got out, shining his flashlight at my window. I could see his badge, his uniform, his concerned face. Real emergency services. I unlocked the door and practically fell into his arms, sobbing with relief. He helped me into his warm vehicle and wrapped a blanket around me. He asked if I was hurt, if I'd seen anyone else. I tried to tell him about the man in the truck, about the radio, about the other stranded drivers. He listened carefully, taking notes. Then he told me they'd found 2 vehicles at mile markers, 24 and 29. Just like the broadcast had said. Both empty. No signs of the drivers. No footprints leading away in the snow because the storm had covered everything. They'd been checking traffic cameras and satellite data to locate stranded vehicles. That's how they'd found me. I asked him about the radio frequencies, about someone broadcasting fake emergency information. He frowned and said they'd received similar reports from other drivers, but they hadn't been able to trace any unauthorized broadcasts. Probably just fear and stress causing confusion. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw in that truck bed. They took me to town and put me up in a hotel. My car was towed. The next day, the officer called to check on me and mentioned we were the last ones on the mountain when the lift stopped moving. Then we realized we weren't alone up there. I'd been skiing at Blackwood Resort for years, always during the off-season when the crowds were thin and the lift lines were short. That's why I didn't think much of it when my buddy Jake and I found ourselves as the only people on the chairlift at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. The place was practically deserted. Just a handful of skiers scattered across the mountain, all heading down for the day. We were about halfway up when the lift jerked to a stop. Not unusual. They paused them all the time to let people load at the bottom. Jake and I sat there, swinging our legs, watching the snow start to fall harder. The weather had been deteriorating all afternoon, going from light flurries to something more serious. The wind was picking up too, making the chair sway. After 5 minutes, the lift still hadn't moved. I looked back down the line and didn't see anyone else on the chairs behind us. Looked up ahead. Empty chairs all the way to the top. We seemed to be the only ones on the entire lift. They probably shut it down for the day, Jake said. Storm's getting bad. He was right. Visibility was dropping fast. That thick kind of snowfall that erases the world around you. But if they'd shut down the lift, why hadn't they brought us down first? Standard procedure was to clear all riders before stopping operations. I pulled out my phone to check the resort's website for alerts. No signal. We were high enough up that cell service was always spotty and the storm wasn't helping. I looked toward the lift operator station at the base, but I couldn't see it anymore through the snow. They know we're up here, I said, more to reassure myself than Jake. They'll get it running again. We waited. 10 minutes became 20. The temperature was dropping, and my hands were starting to go numb, even in my gloves. Jake tried yelling down toward the base, but his voice just got swallowed by the wind. The mountain was eerily quiet, except for the creaking of the lift cable and the howl of the storm. That's when I noticed the chair. It was 6 or 7 positions ahead of us, swaying slightly in the wind like all the others. But there was something on it. I squinted through the falling snow, trying to make it out. A dark shape too large to be forgotten ski equipment. "Hey Jake, is there someone on that chair up there?" He looked where I was pointing. "I don't think so. Probably just shadows. Or wait, the shape moved, or seemed to. It was hard to tell with the snow and the swaying of the chairs, but I could swear I saw it shift position. Someone was sitting there, hunched forward, completely still otherwise. "Hello," I shouted. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. The figure didn't move again. Jake cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled too, louder than me. Nothing. Whoever it was just sat there, motionless, facing away from us. "Maybe they can't hear us over the wind," Jake said, but he sounded uncertain. I tried to remember if I'd seen anyone ahead of us when we boarded the lift. I didn't think so, but I'd been messing with my phone and not paying attention. They could have gotten on just before us. Another 10 minutes crawled by. The storm was a full blizzard now, and I was genuinely getting worried about hypothermia. We were dressed for skiing, not for sitting motionless in sub-zero wind chill. And that person ahead of us still hadn't moved or responded. "We should try to climb down," Jake suggested, looking at the cables and support towers. "That's like 40 feet in this weather. We'd die. We might die sitting here." He had a point. I was about to agree when I heard something. A mechanical sound, distant and muffled by snow. An engine, the grooming machines maybe, or a snowmobile. It was impossible to tell where it was coming from. Then, through the white curtain of snow, I saw lights, red and white, moving across the slope below us. A snowmobile, heading up the mountain. Relief flooded through me. They were coming to get us. But the snowmobile didn't come toward our lift. It moved horizontally across the mountain, stopped for a moment, then continued on until it disappeared into the storm. I tried yelling again, but it was already too far away. Did they not see us? Jake's voice cracked slightly. I didn't answer because I was looking at the chair ahead of us again. The dark figure was gone. The chair was empty, swaying innocently in the wind. "Jake, that person, they're not there anymore." He followed my gaze. "What? Where'd they go?" "I don't know. They were just there." We both stared at the empty chair. There was no way someone could have climbed down without us seeing. We'd been watching that direction the whole time, and even if they had somehow descended, we would have seen them on the slope below. But there was nothing, just untracked snow. "Maybe we were seeing things," Jake said quietly. "The snow playing tricks." Maybe. But I knew what I'd seen. Someone had been sitting on that chair. The lift suddenly lurched into motion, making us both grab the safety bar. The chairs started moving upward again, slowly but steadily. We were going to the top. "Finally," Jake breathed, "they'll have someone at the summit station to let us off." But as we ascended, passing empty chair after empty chair, a terrible thought occurred to me. If the lift had been shut down, and if we were the only ones on it, why had it started moving again? Lift operators didn't restart closed lifts remotely. Someone at the top would have to be running it manually. We rose through the storm, visibility near zero. I could barely see Jake beside me, let alone what was ahead or below. The wind screamed around us. My face was numb, my fingers barely functioning. I'd lost all feeling in my toes. The summit station appeared suddenly out of the white, a dark structure looming above us. Our chair approached the unloading zone, and I prepared to ski off. But something was wrong. The normal, automated system that slowed chairs for unloading wasn't working. We came in too fast. "Jump!" Jake yelled. We both bailed off the chair awkwardly, tumbling into the snow at the platform. The lift kept running, empty chairs continuing their circuit back down the mountain. I scrambled to my feet, looking for the lift operator's boot. The door was open, swinging in the wind. Snow had drifted inside. I approached carefully and looked in. No one there. The controls were running, the lift motor humming, but the booth was empty and freezing. It had been open for a while. "There's no one here," I called to Jake. He was staring at something on the ground near the chair loading zone. I walked over, and my stomach dropped. Ski tracks in the snow, already half filled, recent, leading away from the lift and toward the trees. "Someone was up here," Jake said. "Someone started the lift and then left." The tracks led to the tree line and vanished into the darkness of the forest. No one in their right mind would ski into the woods during a blizzard. The terrain was unmarked, full of cliffs and obstacles. It would be suicide. We needed to get down the mountain. The normal runs were too dangerous in zero visibility, but there was an access road that ski patrol used. We could follow it down on foot if we had to. As we started toward the road, I glanced back at the lift one more time. A chair was just cresting the top of the station, coming up from below, and sitting on it, hunched and motionless, was a dark figure. I grabbed Jake's arm. "Look." The figure rode past the unloading zone without getting off, continuing around the corner to start the descent back down the mountain. We only got a glimpse, but it was enough. A person in dark winter gear, sitting completely still, facing forward. "Who the hell is that?" Jake whispered. We watched the chair descend into the storm. Then another chair came up. Empty. Another empty. Then one more with a figure on it. Same dark clothes. Same hunched posture. It rode past without stopping. "They're riding in circles," I said. Over and over. Jake's face had gone pale. "We need to leave, right now." We started down the access road, half running, half stumbling through knee-deep snow. The wind tried to push us back. I kept looking over my shoulder at the lift, at those occupied chairs appearing out of the storm every few minutes. Their passengers never stopping, never acknowledging us, just riding the endless loop. It took us nearly 2 hours to reach the base. We were hypothermic, exhausted, barely conscious. Security found us collapsed near the main lodge and got us inside. They called an ambulance, wrapped us in heated blankets, gave us hot drinks. When we could finally talk, we told them everything about being stranded on the lift, about it restarting on its own, about the people riding in circles at the summit. The head of security looked confused. He checked his computer, then his radio logs. According to their records, the lift had been shut down at 4:00 p.m. due to weather. No one had restarted it. It had been locked down, powered off. No one had been up there. "We were on it," Jake insisted. "It was running. There were people." "I believe you were on a lift," the security chief said carefully. "But it wasn't the Blackwood Express. That lift has been closed all day for maintenance. The entire motor assembly was removed yesterday. He pulled up a photo on his computer. The lift we'd been on, photographed that morning. The chairs were there hanging on the cable, but there was yellow caution tape everywhere. And the motor housing at the top station was open. Components missing. "You must have been on the summit chair on the other side of the mountain," he said. Similar view. Easy to confuse them in a storm. But I knew which lift we'd been on. I'd ridden it 100 times. And Jake knew too. I could see it in his eyes. They found our abandoned skis the next morning when the storm cleared at the base of the Blackwood Express lift, right where we'd left them. The lift was still motionless, still shut down, motors still in pieces. But there were tracks in the snow around the summit station, fresh ones, and one set of ski tracks leading from the top down into the trees, where no one should have been able to go. Ski patrol followed them for a while before losing the trail in a ravine. They never found who made them. We never went back to Blackwood Resort. I still get emails from them sometimes. Season pass renewals. Special promotions. The last one included a photo of their newly renovated Blackwood Express lift, fully operational again. In the background of the photo, if you look carefully at the chairs ascending the mountain, you can see dark shapes on some of them. The marketing team probably didn't notice. Just random shadows, tricks of light. But I know better. I zoomed in on one of the shapes. It's sitting in the exact same position I remember. Hunched forward, motionless, still riding. When the blizzard knocked out our power, we sealed every door and window. That's when we heard footsteps upstairs. My wife Sarah and I moved into our farmhouse in rural Montana 3 months before the incident. The property was perfect. 200 acres of privacy. Closest neighbor 5 miles away. Exactly what we wanted after years of cramped city living. The house itself was old, built in the 1960s, but solid. 2 stories, full basement, plenty of room for the family we were planning to start. The blizzard warning came on a Wednesday. They predicted 30 inches of snow and wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour. We'd been through Montana winters before, so we prepared the usual way. Stocked up on groceries, filled the generator with gas, brought in firewood. By Thursday afternoon, the storm hit exactly as forecasted. We lost power around 6 p.m. No big deal. We had the generator running within minutes, and the house stayed warm. Sarah made dinner on our gas stove while I secured the last of the shutters. The wind was already screaming, rattling every window, driving snow against the walls with a sound like static. After dinner, we settled in the living room with books and blankets, content to wait out the storm. That's when we heard it. A thump from directly above us from the second floor. We both looked up at the ceiling. Sarah lowered her book. "What was that?" "Probably a shutter coming loose," I said, but my heart had already started beating faster. I just secured all the shutters. "I'll check." I grabbed a flashlight and headed upstairs. Our bedroom was at the top of the stairs, guest room and bathroom at the end of the hall. Everything looked normal. I checked each room carefully, under beds and closets, behind doors. Nothing. The windows were all shuttered and locked. No signs of anything wrong. I was heading back downstairs when I heard it again. This time from the guest room I just checked. A distinct sound like something heavy being dragged across the floor. I spun around and walked back down the hall. The guest room door was still open exactly as I'd left it. I shined my flashlight inside. Empty. The old furniture sat undisturbed, covered in the same dust as before. But the sound had been so clear, so close. "Everything okay?" Sarah called from downstairs. "Yeah, just house settling in the cold, I think." I came back down and tried to relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling. The farmhouse had been empty for 2 years before we bought it. The realtor mentioned the previous owners had left suddenly, some family emergency back east, sold the place as is, with most of their furniture still inside. We'd been meaning to clean out the extra stuff, but hadn't gotten around to it yet. Around 9 p.m., the generator sputtered and died. I went to check on it. The fuel line had frozen despite my precautions. It would take at least an hour to thaw and restart. In the meantime, we had no heat and no lights, except for our flashlights and the fireplace. We dragged our mattress downstairs and set up camp in the living room by the fire. It seemed smarter to stay in one warm room, rather than heat the whole house with just the fireplace. Sarah made hot chocolate, while I got the fire roaring. We were making the best of it, trying to stay positive. That's when the footsteps started. Slow, deliberate footsteps, walking across the upstairs hallway from one end to the other, then back again. We sat frozen, listening. The footsteps stopped, started again. This time in what sounded like the guest room. "Someone's in our house," Sarah whispered. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no other explanation. I grabbed the tire iron from our emergency kit. We didn't own a gun yet, something I was deeply regretting. Sarah called 911, but the call wouldn't go through. The storm must have taken out the cell towers. "Stay here," I told her. "Keep the fire poker. If anyone comes down those stairs who isn't me, you hit them." I started up the stairs with my flashlight and tire iron. The footsteps had stopped. The second floor was completely dark. My flashlight beam, the only light cutting through the blackness. I checked our bedroom first. Empty. Bathroom. Empty. I approached the guest room slowly, every nerve screaming. The door was closed. I'd left it open. I stood there for a long moment, listening. No sound from inside. I reached for the doorknob, turned it slowly, pushed the door open. The beam of my flashlight swept across the room. Everything looked the same as before. Same dusty furniture, same bare walls. No one there. But the air felt different somehow, disturbed, and there was a smell I hadn't noticed before. Stale cigarette smoke, and something else. Body odor. Someone had been in here recently. I checked the closet, my hands shaking. Nothing but old clothes left by the previous owners. I was turning to leave when my flashlight caught something on the floor. Footprints in the dust. Not mine. Mine had been smaller, with the tread pattern from my boots. These were larger, smooth-soled, leading from the closet to the window and back. My blood turned to ice. Someone had been walking around this room recently. Maybe in the last few minutes while I was downstairs. I ran to the window, still shuttered, still locked from the inside. No way someone could have gotten out, which meant they were still in the house. I searched the room again, more frantically this time. Under the bed, nothing. Behind the dresser, nothing. Back to the closet, pushing aside the hanging clothes more aggressively. Just the back wall. Except the back wall sounded hollow when I knocked on it. I examined it more closely. There was a seam, barely visible, running down one side. A panel. I pressed against it and it swung inward slightly. Not a wall, a door. My mind raced. The house had a hidden room. The blueprint we'd received at closing hadn't shown anything like this. I should have gone back downstairs, gotten Sarah, left the house entirely. But I needed to know what was behind that door. I pulled it open, a narrow space, maybe 4 feet by 6 feet. Built into what should have been dead space between the guest room and the exterior wall. Inside were blankets, pillows, empty food containers, lots of them, water bottles, a camping lantern. Someone had been living here. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my flashlight. Someone had been living in our walls. For how long? Since before we moved in? Since after? I ran downstairs, probably too loud, no longer caring about stealth. Sarah stood by the fire, poker raised. We need to leave right now. What? In this storm? What did you find? Someone's been living in the house. There's a hidden room upstairs. We need to... The lights came on. All of them. The generator had somehow started again. Or maybe the main power had come back. The sudden brightness was disorienting after the darkness. And in that light, we both saw it. Wet footprints on the floor, leading from the basement door across the kitchen. We'd been so focused on upstairs that we hadn't thought about the basement. The basement door was open, just slightly. I'd closed it before the storm. I always closed it. The basement gave me the creeps, even in daylight. Sarah grabbed my arm. Please tell me you went down there earlier. I shook my head. The footprints were fresh, melting snow still visible in the treads. Someone had come up from the basement within the last few minutes. While we'd been sitting right there, while I'd been upstairs, we heard it then. The basement stairs creaking, someone coming up, slow steps in no particular hurry. We ran for the front door. I grabbed the deadbolt and twisted. It wouldn't budge. The lock was frozen, ice in the mechanism from where snow had blown in earlier. I threw my weight against the door. Nothing. Back door, Sarah said. We ran through the kitchen. The footprints on the floor were still wet, leading from the basement too. We stopped. They didn't lead anywhere. They just ended in the middle of the kitchen floor, like whoever made them had simply vanished. The back door was frozen shut too. We were trapped. I looked around desperately for something to break a window with, knowing the shutters would make it nearly impossible. When the basement door creaked fully open, a man stood there, mid-40s, disheveled, wearing clothes I vaguely recognized from the closet upstairs. He looked at us calmly, like we were the ones intruding. Storm's pretty bad out there, he said quietly. Probably safer to stay inside tonight. We backed away. He didn't follow, just stood there in the doorway. I've been very respectful, he continued, stayed quiet, only moved around when you were asleep or out of the house. I was going to leave in the spring, I promise, but then the storm came and well, the basement's warmer than that little room upstairs. Sarah's voice came out as barely a whisper. How long have you been here? He smiled, and it wasn't a crazy smile or a threatening one. That somehow made it worse. He looked completely rational. I never really left, he said. This is my house. I grew up here. When my parents died and I had to sell it, I couldn't actually go. So I stayed in the spaces between the walls in the basement. I've been here the whole time. He took a step into the kitchen. We backed toward the living room. You seem like nice people, he said. I don't want any trouble. But this storm is going to last a few more days at least. The roads won't be clear for a week. No one's coming. So maybe we should all just try to get along until then. There's plenty of room. You take upstairs. I'll stay in the basement. We don't even have to interact much. He was between us and both exits now. The windows were shuttered and frozen. The phone didn't work. No one knew we were in trouble. Or, he said, his smile fading slightly, you could try to make me leave, but I know this house better than you do. Every room, every hiding place, every loose board and quiet space. You've been here 3 months. I've been here my entire life. Sarah and I stood there, trapped in our own living room, while outside, the storm raged on. The man who used to own our house, who apparently still considered it his, sat down at our kitchen table like he belonged there, like he'd never left. We spent that night huddled in the living room, taking turns staying awake. He stayed in the kitchen, just sitting there, occasionally making himself tea with our supplies. Never threatening, never aggressive, just there. When the storm finally ended 4 days later and we could leave, we never came back, not even to get our things. We sold the house through our lawyer, took a massive loss, and moved back to the city. The new owners seemed happy with their purchase. They sent us a thank you card for leaving so much furniture. They mentioned they loved how lived in the place felt. I wanted to warn them. I really did. But sometimes at night, I wonder if I had. Would they have believed me? Would anyone, or would they have just thought we were crazy? I saw on social media last month that they're renovating, planning to finish the basement, turn it into a game room for their kids. I hope they find it empty. The ranger said we could wait out the blizzard in the emergency shelter. He didn't mention someone was already using it. I was 3 days into a solo hiking trip in the Cascades when the weather turned. I'd checked the forecast religiously before leaving. Clear skies predicted for the entire week. But mountain weather is unpredictable. And what started as light afternoon snow, quickly, I could barely see 20 feet ahead. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees in an hour. I'd been hiking the Pacific Crest Trail section, planning to camp at designated sites, but camping in this was impossible. I needed real shelter. I remembered passing a ranger station about 2 miles back. I turned around and pushed through deepening snow, my pack, a small wooden building with a green roof and a covered porch. The ranger inside was a woman in her 50s, friendly enough. She took one look at me and shook her head. You can't go back out in this. Storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better. She pulled out a map and marked a location with her finger. There's an emergency shelter about a mile east of here. It's basic, just 4 walls and a wood stove, but it'll keep you alive. You're welcome to stay here, but I'm closing up in 20 minutes and heading down the mountain. A mile through a blizzard versus staying in a warm ranger station seemed like an obvious choice. But she explained that protocol required her to lock up and evacuate during severe weather. Insurance liability. She couldn't let me stay behind. She gave me detailed directions to the shelter, made me repeat them back, and sent me off with a spare walkie-talkie. Channel 7 if you need anything, but reception's spotty in storms. Just sit tight and someone will check on you when this clears. The hike to the shelter was brutal. Even with her directions, I almost missed it. Just a small cabin, tucked into a grove of pines, barely visible through the snow. The door was unlocked, just as she'd said. I pushed it open and stumbled inside, grateful to be out of the wind. The shelter was a single room, maybe 15 by 20 feet. A wood stove sat in one corner, a stack of firewood beside it. There were 2 sets of bunk beds, a small table, some folding chairs, very basic, but dry and relatively warm. I dropped my pack and started working on getting a fire going. My hands were numb, making it difficult to handle the matches. I was so focused on the task that I didn't immediately notice the details. When I finally got the fire lit and turned around, I saw them. Personal items scattered around the room. A sleeping bag draped over one of the lower bunks. A pair of boots by the door that definitely weren't mine. A backpack. Panting wet. leaning against the far wall, much larger and more worn than mine. Someone else was using this shelter, or had been recently. I walked over to the bunk. The sleeping bag was the expensive kind, rated for extreme cold. I touched it, still slightly warm. My stomach tightened. Whoever it belonged to had been here very recently. Maybe they just stepped out when they heard me approaching. I went to the door and opened it, looking out into the storm. "Hello, anyone out there?" My voice was swallowed by the wind. I couldn't see more than a few feet. If someone was standing just beyond the tree, I'd never know. I closed the door and locked it. Then I noticed the lock was just a simple sliding bolt. It would keep the door closed against the wind, but wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted to get in. The rational part of my brain tried to calm me down. Maybe whoever owned this stuff had emergency shelter access like me. Maybe they were out gathering more firewood. Maybe they'd be glad to share the space during the storm. People helped each other in situations like this. But something felt off. The ranger hadn't mentioned anyone else being out here. And the way the gear was arranged, it looked lived in. Like someone had been staying here for more than just a night or two. I pulled out the walkie-talkie. "Hello, Ranger Station, do you copy?" Static. I tried again. Nothing. Either I was out of range, or the storm was interfering with the signal. I was on my own. I decided to search the other backpack. I know it was a violation of privacy, but I needed to know who I might be sharing this shelter with. The pack was stuffed with supplies, canned food, water bottles, rope, a hunting knife in a leather sheath, and at the bottom, a notebook. I opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting, entries dated over the past 3 weeks. My hands started shaking as I read. Most entries were mundane observations about the weather, wildlife sightings, notes about trails, but the more recent ones were different. They talked about avoiding detection and staying off the ranger schedules. One entry mentioned watching hikers pass by without revealing himself. Another talked about how easy it was to move through the forest unseen, how the rangers never checked the backcountry shelters thoroughly. The most recent entry was from this morning. "Storm coming. Good cover. Might stay another week." I dropped the notebook. Whoever this person was, they were deliberately hiding out here, living off the grid in an emergency shelter, avoiding contact with rangers and other hikers. That alone wasn't necessarily sinister. Some people just wanted to be alone. But the way it was written, the tone of the entries made my skin crawl. A sound outside made me freeze. Footsteps on the wooden porch, heavy and deliberate. They stopped at the door. I stared at it, holding my breath. The door handle moved slightly, testing the lock. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm using the shelter for the storm. The ranger sent me here." Silence. Then a voice muffled by the door and wind. "That's my bunk you're looking at." Male voice. Older. Calm. Too calm. "I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was here." The ranger didn't mention. Rangers don't know I'm here. That's the point. My mind raced. Should I let him in? It was his shelter, in a sense. He'd been here first. But every instinct told me not to open that door. "Listen," I said, "there's room for both of us. Why don't you come in and we can wait out the storm together?" A long pause. "You read my notebook, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He could probably tell from my voice that I had. "I saw your footprints coming up to the door," he continued. "Watched you from the trees. You came from the ranger station. She sent you here. She didn't know about me, but now you do. That's a problem." "I won't tell anyone," I said quickly. "I don't care why you're out here. It's none of my business. I just need to wait out the storm, and then I'll leave." "You'll tell the rangers." Soon as the weather clears, you'll tell them someone's squatting in their shelter. They'll come looking. I've been careful for 3 weeks. I can't have you ruining that. I backed away from the door, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. The wood stove poker was the best option. I grabbed it, feeling ridiculous and terrified at the same time. "I'm not going to let you in," I said. "This is an emergency shelter. I have as much right to be here as you do." He laughed, a dry sound. "You think that lock will keep me out? I've been living in these woods for 3 weeks. I know how to get into places." He was right. The shelter wasn't secure. The windows were just single-pane glass, easy to break. The door was old wood, the lock flimsy. If he wanted to get in, he would. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to leave. Go back out in the storm. Tell the rangers you couldn't find the shelter. I don't care. Just go away and forget you saw my stuff. I'll die out there. It's already dark and the storm is getting worse." Not my problem. I stood there, poker in hand, trying to think of a way out of this. The walkie-talkie was useless. My phone had no signal. The storm was too severe to risk hiking back to the ranger station in the dark. Then I realized he wasn't trying to break in. He was just standing out there talking. If he really wanted to force his way inside, he would have done it already. He was trying to scare me into leaving on my own. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, forcing confidence into my voice. "I'm staying right here until morning. If you want the shelter, you're welcome to come in, but I'm not leaving." Silence long enough that I thought maybe he'd gone. Then his voice came again, quieter now. "Fine, we'll both wait. But come morning, when that storm clears, you're going to have a decision to make. You can walk away and never mention this to anyone, or you can tell the rangers about me. But if you choose wrong, I know what you look like now. I know your gear, your face. These mountains are big, but I'm very patient." I heard his footsteps move away from the door, crunching through snow. I ran to the window and looked out, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness and blowing snow. I spent that night sitting at the table facing the door, poker across my lap, feeding the fire to stay warm. Every sound made me jump. Every creak of the building in the wind sounded like someone trying to get in. But the door never opened. When dawn came, gray and weak through the windows, the storm had lessened to light snow. I packed my gear as quickly as possible and opened the door. Fresh snow had covered any tracks from the night before. The shelter looked peaceful, almost inviting in the early light. I hiked back to the ranger station and told the woman what had happened. She looked concerned and immediately called for backup. They sent a team to check the shelter that afternoon. They found it empty. No notebook, no extra backpack, no sleeping bag. Just the basic emergency supplies that were supposed to be there. The rangers searched the area for 2 days and found no trace of anyone camping in the backcountry. They were polite about it, but I could tell they thought I'd imagined things. Altitude, stress, fear of the storm. These things could play tricks on your mind. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there moving between shelters, always staying one step ahead of the rangers. I wonder how many other hikers have found his stuff and made the choice to stay quiet. Last month, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph, a Polaroid, old style. It showed the emergency shelter from the outside, taken from the tree line. And in the window, barely visible, was a silhouette. Someone standing inside, looking out. The date stamp on the photo was from 2 days after I'd left, after the rangers had searched and found nothing. On the back, in handwriting I recognized from the notebook, was a single sentence. "Thanks for keeping quiet." But I didn't keep quiet. I told the Rangers everything. So why was he thanking me? I knocked on the door asking for help. The woman who answered said, "Thank God you're finally here." My car died on a backcountry road in upstate New York during the worst snowstorm I'd ever seen. One moment the engine was running fine. The next it just cut out completely. I coasted to a stop on the shoulder, tried to restart it a dozen times. Nothing. The battery was dead. My phone had no signal, and the temperature was dropping fast. I'd been driving to my sister's place for Christmas, taking the scenic route to avoid highway traffic. Stupid decision. The road was completely empty. No other cars in either direction. Just me and the snow coming down so thick I could barely see the hood of my car. I knew the basics of winter survival. Stay with your vehicle. Run the engine periodically for heat. Wait for help. But with a dead battery and no way to call anyone, staying put meant freezing to death. I had to find help. I grabbed my phone for its flashlight, bundled up in everything I had, and started walking. The wind cut through my jacket immediately. I couldn't feel my face within minutes. I followed the road, knowing that leaving it would be suicide, hoping I'd find a house or at least another car. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes, I saw lights through the trees. A house set back from the road, about 100 yards, windows glowing warm and yellow. I nearly cried with relief. I stumbled up the long driveway, my legs barely working. The house was old, a 2-story farmhouse that had probably been there for a century. Christmas lights were strung along the porch railing, and I could see a decorated tree through the front window. Signs of normal, safe, civilized life. I climbed the porch steps and knocked hard on the door. "Please be home. Please answer. Please help me." I knocked again, harder. The door opened, and a woman stood there, maybe 60 years old, wearing an apron. She looked at me, and her face broke into a huge smile. "Oh, thank God," she said. "Thank God you're finally here. I was getting so worried. Come in, come in. You must be freezing." She pulled me inside before I could respond, already talking as she helped me out of my snow-covered jacket. The house was blissfully warm. I could smell something cooking, a roast maybe. Christmas music played softly from another room. "I'm so sorry," I managed through chattering teeth. "My car broke down about a mile back. I just need to use your phone to call for help." She wasn't listening. She hung my jacket on a coat rack and steered me toward the living room. "You're here now. That's what matters. We were starting to think you weren't going to make it. Dinner's almost ready. You must be starving. I think there's been a misunderstanding." I said, I don't know you. My car just broke down." She patted my arm and smiled. "Oh, you're disoriented from the cold. That's perfectly normal. Sit down by the fire and warm up. I'll get you something hot to drink." She disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen before I could explain further. I stood there confused, dripping melted snow onto her carpet. The living room looked like something from a magazine, perfectly decorated for Christmas. Everything neat and traditional. A fire crackled in the fireplace. Stockings hung from the mantel, each one embroidered with a name. Michael, Sarah, Jessica. A man appeared in the doorway, older than the woman, wearing a cardigan and glasses. He smiled when he saw me. "There you are," he said warmly. "Glad you made it through that storm. It's a bad one." Emma was getting worried. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. My car broke down and I just need to, of course. Of course. We'll get that sorted out. But first, you need to warm up and get some food in you. Can't have you going back out in that storm. He gestured to an armchair by the fire. Please, sit. Something was very wrong, but I was too cold and confused to figure out what. I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. The man, Emma's husband, I assumed, sat across from me and started talking about the storm, about how they'd been expecting it, how they'd prepared. Emma came back with hot chocolate and pressed the mug into my hands. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. As I drank, I tried again to explain. I really appreciate your help, but I'm not whoever you think I am. I was just driving to my sister's house when my car died. I need to call a tow truck or the police, or shh. Don't worry about all that now, Emma said, sitting on the couch. You're safe, and that's what matters. The man leaned forward. You've had a traumatic experience. The cold can affect your memory. Just relax. I looked between them, my confusion deepening into something close to fear. They were looking at me with such warmth, such familiarity, like I was supposed to be here, like they'd been waiting for me specifically. Who do you think I am? I asked quietly. They exchanged a glance. Emma's smile faltered for just a moment. You're Jessica, of course, she said. Our daughter. My blood ran cold, despite the fire. I'm not your daughter. My name is Rachel. I don't know you. The man's expression didn't change. The cold has confused you. That's all right. You're home now. This isn't my home. I stood up, setting down the mug. I need to use your phone right now. Sit down, Jessica. The man's voice was firmer now. Not angry, but authoritative. You're not well. I'm not Jessica. My voice came out louder than I intended. I don't know who Jessica is, but I'm not her. Please, just let me use your phone. Emma stood up, wringing her hands. Michael, she's upset. This isn't good for her. I know. Michael stood too, moving slightly between me and the front door. Jessica, honey, you need to calm down. You always get like this when you're stressed. That's why you needed to come home, remember? I backed toward the hallway. Stay away from me. I'm leaving. I turned and ran toward the front door, but Michael was faster than he looked. He grabbed my arm, not roughly, but firmly. You can't go back out there, he said. Look at the storm. You'll die out there. He was right about that. Through the front window, I could see the blizzard had intensified. Visibility was 0. The temperature had to be below 0. But staying here with these people who thought I was their daughter felt more dangerous than the storm. Let go of me, I said. Not until you calm down. His grip tightened slightly. Emma, get her medication. Medication. I yanked my arm free and stumbled backward. Emma was already heading upstairs. I had to get out of here, storm or no storm. I ran for the front door. It was locked, a deadbolt that required a key from the inside. I fumbled with it, but couldn't get it open. Michael was walking toward me slowly, hands raised like I was a spooked animal. Jessica, you're having an episode. We just want to help you. I'm not having an episode. I'm not Jessica. I looked around frantically for another exit. The windows were old, probably painted shut. Breaking one would take time I didn't have. Emma came back downstairs with a pill bottle. Here, this will help you feel better. I ran toward the back of the house, through a dining room, looking for a back door. I found it. Another locked door behind me. I heard their footsteps following, not rushing, just walking calmly, like they had all the time in the world. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted. They appeared in the doorway. Emma was crying now. "Because you're sick," she said. "You ran away 6 months ago. You stopped taking your medication. We've been so worried. When we saw you walking up the driveway, we thought it was a miracle." "I am not your daughter. The delusions are getting worse," Michael said to Emma. "We should call Dr. Morrison." "No, listen to me. My name is Rachel Chen. I'm 28 years old. I'm a graphic designer from Boston. I was driving to Syracuse to visit my sister Amy for Christmas. You can verify all of this. Just let me call someone." They looked at each other again. Some silent communication passed between them. "She thinks she's someone else," Emma whispered, just like before. "Before?" I backed against the wall. "What do you mean, before?" Michael pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Dr. Morrison. He'll know what to do." While he was distracted with his phone, I bolted back toward the living room. Maybe I could break a window. Maybe I could find those door keys. Maybe. I stopped, dead in the hallway. There were photographs on the wall, family photos in frames. A younger Emma and Michael, a girl at various ages, childhood, teenage years, early 20s. In the most recent photo, the girl was maybe 25, standing between her parents, smiling. She looked exactly like me. Not similar, not kind of like me, exactly like me. Same face, same hair color, same height, like looking in a mirror. "That's not possible," I whispered. Emma was behind me now. "You see, you're home, Jessica. We've missed you so much." I touched the photograph with a shaking hand. The resemblance was impossible. We could be twins. We could be the same person. "Who is she?" I asked. "Who is Jessica? Really?" Emma's smile was sad. "You are, honey. You've always been our Jessica." "Where is she now?" I turned to face them. "Your real daughter. Where is she?" They looked at each other, and for the first time, I saw something crack in their facade. Fear, grief, something dark. "You're right here," Michael said, but his voice wavered. "No, I'm not." "So where is she?" Emma started crying harder. Michael put his arm around her. When he looked back at me, his eyes were different. Desperate. "She's been gone for 6 months, he said quietly. "We don't know where she is. She left one night and never came back. The police stopped looking after 3 months, but we knew she'd come home. We knew if we just waited, someone would come home to us." The words hung in the air. Someone, not Jessica. Someone. "You knew I wasn't her. I said from the beginning. You knew." Emma wiped her eyes. "You look so much like her. Same height, same face. When you knocked on the door, it was like a gift. Like we were being given another chance." I looked at the locked doors, the medication, the way they'd been so insistent. They'd been waiting for someone, anyone, who looked enough like their missing daughter. And I'd walked right into their trap. "I'm leaving," I said firmly. "Give me the keys to the doors now." "It's still storming," Michael said. "You'll die out there." "That's my choice." They didn't move. We stood there in a standoff, me against the wall, them blocking the hallway. The Christmas music still played cheerfully in the background. "Please," Emma said, "just stay for dinner. Just tonight, in the morning, when the storm clears. If you still want to leave, we won't stop you. We just want one Christmas with our daughter, even if it's not really her. Please." I looked at these two broken people who'd lost their daughter and been driven to something desperate and insane. I thought about the storm outside, about freezing to death trying to walk back to my car. And I thought about how far people will go when grief breaks them. One night, I heard myself say, and in the morning, I leave. Emma's face lit up. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You won't regret this. I promise. They led me to the dining room where a full Christmas dinner was laid out. 3 place settings. They'd been expecting 3 people. Emma served the food while talking about Jessica, about her childhood, about her favorite things. Michael poured wine. I sat there and ate and listened, and didn't touch the wine because I didn't trust it. After dinner, Emma showed me to my room. Jessica's room preserved exactly as she'd left it. Posters on the walls, clothes in the closet, a laptop on the desk. Get some rest, Emma said. We'll have breakfast together in the morning. She closed the door. I heard it lock from the outside. I ran to the window, still painted shut. I grabbed the laptop, password protected. I checked the closet for anything useful, and found old yearbooks, diaries, clothes, all belonging to a girl who looked exactly like me. A girl who disappeared 6 months ago. I sat on the bed and tried to think. The storm would clear by morning. They'd promised to let me go. Maybe they would. Maybe this really was just about 2 grieving parents having one last Christmas with a daughter who looked like theirs. Or maybe I just made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm writing this on my phone while I still have battery. It's almost dead. If you're reading this, my name is Rachel Chen. I broke down on County Road 47 in upstate New York on December 23rd. I'm in a white farmhouse about a mile east of mile marker 34. If I don't update this by tomorrow night, send help. And if you see a missing persons report for a Jessica Monroe, check if she looks like me, because I just realized I never told them my last name, but they knew it anyway. I watched someone walk away from my house into the woods during the blizzard. An hour later, the same footprints were walking back toward my door. I live alone in a rental house at the edge of a state forest in Maine. It's isolated, which is exactly what I wanted after my divorce. The nearest neighbor is half a mile away, and I like it that way. I work remotely, keep to myself, and enjoy the quiet. The blizzard started on a Friday evening. The forecast had called for light snow, maybe 3 or 4 in, but by 8 p.m., it was coming down in thick, heavy curtains. I made dinner, poured some wine, and settled in to watch a movie. The power would probably go out eventually, but I had candles and a fireplace. I wasn't worried. Around 9:30, I got up to close the curtains in my living room. That's when I saw them. Footprints in the snow, coming from the tree line, and stopping at my back porch. Fresh prints, barely filled in by the falling snow. Someone had walked right up to my house within the last few minutes. My heart started pounding. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see if anyone was still out there. The porch light only reached so far, and beyond that was just darkness and snow. I couldn't see anyone, but the prints were there. Clear as day. Boot prints large. Definitely not mine. I checked the back door. Locked. I went through the house, checking every window, every entrance. Everything was secure. Whoever had been out there hadn't tried to get in. Maybe they'd just been lost in the storm, checking to see if anyone was home. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I turned off all the interior lights and looked out the window again. The footprints led from the woods to my porch, then back toward the woods. Whoever it was had left. I should have felt relieved, but something about it bothered me. Why would someone walk all the way up to my house in a blizzard, not knock, and then just leave? The nearest road was a quarter mile away. There was nothing out here except my house and trees. I kept watching the tree line, and that's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The footprints going into the woods weren't following the same path as the ones coming out. They went in at a different angle, deeper into the forest, away from the road, away from anything. /P Primar. Where does he end? I grabbed my phone to call the police, but I had no signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. My landline was dead too. I'd let the service lapse months ago, since I only used my cell. I was completely cut off. I decided to stay calm and rational. Probably just someone who got disoriented in the storm. They'd realize their mistake and find their way back to the road. The road. It had nothing to do with me. I locked myself in my bedroom, pushed a chair against the door for extra security, and tried to sleep. I couldn't. Every sound made me jump. The wind howling, snow hitting the windows, the house creaking and settling. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom. As I passed the upstairs window that overlooked the backyard, I glanced out. The footprints were back. Same track, coming from the woods to my porch. Fresh again. The previous ones almost completely covered by new snow. Someone had made the exact same walk to my house. I watched, barely breathing, waiting to see if they'd walk away again. Minutes passed. The prints just sat there, ending at my porch. No one walked away. No new tracks appeared. Whoever made them was still down there. I crept downstairs as quietly as possible and looked out the back window. I couldn't see anyone on the porch. The door was still locked, but those footprints were right there, and they didn't continue anywhere. It was like someone had walked up to my house and vanished. Unless they were still on the porch, pressed against the wall, where I couldn't see them from the window. I stood frozen, trying to decide what to do. If someone was out there, what did they want? Why weren't they knocking? Why were they just standing there in a blizzard? Then I heard it. A soft sound, barely audible over the wind, scraping like something being dragged across wood. It was coming from the porch. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I had no phone service, no way to call for help. My nearest neighbor was half a mile away through a blizzard. I was on my own. The scraping stopped. Silence except for the storm. I waited, every muscle tense. Minutes crawled by. Nothing happened. Maybe they'd left. Maybe I'd imagined the sound. Maybe. A face appeared in the window. I screamed and jumped back. It was there for only a second, pale, pressed against the glass, looking in at me. Then it disappeared. I heard footsteps running across the porch, heavy boots on wood. Then, nothing. I ran to the window and looked out. The footprints were leaving again, heading back toward the woods. Same angle as before. I watched them disappear into the darkness, my whole body shaking. Who was this person? What did they want? I spent the rest of the night sitting in my living room with all the lights on, a kitchen knife in my lap, watching the windows. The storm continued to rage. Snow piled up against the house. I didn't see the footprints return again, but I couldn't relax. When gray dawn finally came, the storm had lessened to light snow. I looked out at my backyard. The footprints were still visible. 3 sets now, all coming from the woods to my porch, all leaving at the same angle back into the trees. I needed to know who was doing this. I bundled up in my warmest clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and followed the tracks into the woods. The prints were deep and clear, easy to follow. They led me through the trees, winding between trunks, going deeper into the forest. After about 200 yards, they brought me to a small clearing. There was a tent there, a camping tent covered in snow, partially collapsed. I approached carefully, calling out. No answer. I unzipped the entrance and looked inside. Empty. Just a sleeping bag, some supplies, and a battery-powered lantern. But it looked like someone had been camping here for a while. There were empty food containers, water bottles, a camp stove. Someone was living out here. I backed away from the tent, my mind spinning. Who camps in the Maine woods in December during a blizzard? I looked around the clearing and saw more prints, lots of them, all around the tent. Days worth of tracks, mostly covered by snow, but still visible. Whoever this was had been here for a while. Then I saw where the fresh prints led. They didn't stop at the tent. They continued past it, deeper into the woods. I followed them, though every instinct told me not to. The tracks led me in a wide circle through the trees, around fallen logs, between boulders. After 10 minutes of walking, I realized where I was. I'd come back around to the edge of the woods behind my house. The prints I was following merged with the trail I'd followed out. They were the same tracks. The person had walked from the tent to my house, then back to the tent, then back to my house, over and over, making the same loop. But there was only one set of prints leaving the tent this morning. The ones I was following. No one was out here now except me. I hurried back to my house, locked every door and window, and tried my phone again. Still no signal. The storm was supposed to clear by afternoon. I just needed to wait it out. Around noon, I was making coffee when I heard it. A sound from upstairs. A floorboard creaking. The specific board in my bedroom that always cracks when you step on it. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my knife and moved to the bottom of the stairs. I know you're up there, I called out. I've already called the police. They're on their way. A lie, but maybe it would scare them off. Silence from upstairs. Then, slowly footsteps. Someone walking across my bedroom floor. The steps were deliberate, unhurried. They moved to the top of the stairs. I could see a shadow on the wall, someone standing just out of sight around the corner. What do you want? My voice cracked. The shadow didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there. I have a weapon, I said. If you don't leave right now. The shadow moved, not down the stairs, but back into the bedroom. I heard my closet door open, then close, then open again, like someone was checking it, going through my things. I should have run, should have gone out the front door, and gotten as far away as possible. But this was my house, my space, and I was tired of being scared. I started up the stairs, knife raised, phone flashlight on. Even though the lights were working, each step felt like walking through water. When I reached the top, I could see my bedroom door was open. I looked inside, empty. The closet door was closed. Nothing looked disturbed, but I'd heard someone in here. I checked the closet. Just my clothes under the bed. Nothing. The bathroom empty. I searched every room upstairs. No one was there. But when I came back to my bedroom, I saw it. Wet boot prints on my floor. Leading from the window, which I definitely remembered locking, to my closet. Then back to the window. The window was open now, just a crack. Snow was blowing in. I ran to it and looked out. Footprints in the snow below, beneath my window. Someone had climbed up onto my porch roof and come in through the second-story window. They'd been in my house, in my bedroom, while I was downstairs. The prints below led away from the house, back toward the woods. I watched them, and as I did, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The prints didn't go all the way to the woods. They stopped halfway across my yard, just stopped in the middle of the open snow. And there were no prints leading away from that spot. It was like someone had walked halfway across my yard and disappeared. I slammed the window shut and locked it. Then I went through every room in the house again, checking every possible hiding place, under beds, in closets, behind furniture, in the basement. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. The storm cleared that evening. I got cell service back around 6 o'clock p.m. and immediately called the police. They came out, took a report, looked at the footprints. They found the tent in the woods and bagged some evidence. They told me they'd increase patrols in the area, but they didn't find anyone. The person was gone. I stayed with my sister for a week. When I came back, I had new locks installed, security cameras, a monitored alarm system. I checked the footage obsessively for the first month. Nothing unusual ever appeared, but sometimes late at night, I still hear that creaking floorboard upstairs. I check the cameras, and there's nothing there. I tell myself it's just the house settling, just my imagination. Last week, I was reviewing the camera footage from the night before, and noticed something I'd missed. The camera that points at the woods caught something at 3:47 a.m. Just for a few frames, barely visible in the infrared. A figure standing at the tree line, completely still, facing the house. I scrolled through the next hour of footage. The figure didn't move, didn't leave, just stood there in the cold, watching. Then at 4:52 a.m., it walked forward, slowly, deliberately, right toward my house. The footage cuts out at 4:53 a.m. Technical glitch, according to the security company. When it comes back on, at 5:15 a.m., the figure is gone. But this morning, I found something on my back porch. A small pile of items arranged neatly. A water bottle, an empty food container, and a note. The note said, "Thank you for letting me stay warm. I never let anyone inside. At least not that I know of." My GPS kept rerouting me down a road I'd never seen before. When I finally took it, I understood why it wasn't on any map. I was driving home from a conference in Burlington when the storm hit harder than predicted. The main highway was a parking lot. A semi had jackknifed and blocked all lanes. Traffic wasn't moving. My phone showed red for miles in both directions. I pulled up my GPS to find an alternate route. It calculated for a moment, then displayed a detour that would add maybe 30 minutes, but get me around the backup. The route showed a road cutting through what looked like empty forest land. I'd driven this area dozens of times and didn't recognize the road name, but the GPS was insisting it existed. I took the next exit and followed the directions. Within 10 minutes, I was on progressively smaller roads, each one less maintained than the last. The snow was getting heavier, my wipers working overtime. I started to think this was a mistake. Then I saw it, the road the GPS wanted me to take. A narrow paved road, barely 2 lanes, disappearing into dense forest. There was no street sign, no indication what it was called. But my GPS showed my blue dot right at the turn, and the route continued down this mystery road. I hesitated. Something felt wrong. The road looked recently paved, smooth and black against the white snow, but there were no other tire tracks. No one else had come this way. In a storm this bad, with the highway backed up, someone should have taken this detour. But I was already running late, and the snow was getting worse. I turned onto the road. It was immediately darker under the tree cover. The road was straight as an arrow, cutting through the forest with none of the curves and dips of normal rural roads. The pavement was perfect, too perfect for a backwoods route. No potholes, no patches, no seams, just smooth, dark asphalt. I drove for maybe 5 minutes without seeing anything. No houses, no driveways, no intersections, just trees pressing in on both sides, and that perfectly straight road ahead. My phone showed I was still en route, still making progress toward home. Then my headlights caught something ahead. A car parked sideways across both lanes, completely blocking the road. I slowed down, my heart rate picking up. The car was a sedan, maybe 10 years old, covered in snow. It had been there for a while. I stopped about 20 feet back and put on my hazards, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't see anyone inside the car from this distance. The windows were fogged up or frozen over. I honked my horn. No response. I honked again, longer this time. Nothing. I put my car in park and grabbed my phone. Still had signal, thankfully. I called 911 to report an abandoned vehicle blocking the road. The dispatcher answered and I gave my location as best I could. "What road did you say?" she asked. "I'm not sure of the name. My GPS routed me onto it as a detour from Route 7. It's a paved road running through the forest, heading west." Silence on the line. Then, "Sir, can you describe your exact location? What's the last road sign you saw?" "There aren't any signs. The GPS just shows it as a connecting road between what are the cross streets." I looked at my phone. The GPS showed me on a road, but when I zoomed out, there were no labeled intersections. The road just appeared as a gray line between two highways. "I don't know, but there's a car blocking the road. Someone might need help. Sir, I'm going to transfer you to the state police. Stay in your vehicle." Before I could respond, I was on hold. I sat there, watching the abandoned car, my wipers clearing snow every few seconds. That's when I noticed the door. The driver's side door of the car ahead was slightly open. Just a crack, like someone had gotten out in a hurry and not closed it properly. I ended the call, deciding to just turn around and find another route. But when I looked in my rearview mirror, my stomach dropped. There was another car behind me now, maybe 30 feet back, headlights off, just sitting there in the dark. I hadn't heard it approach, hadn't seen lights in my mirror. It had just appeared. I sat frozen, looking back and forth between the car ahead and the car behind, both blocking me in, both silent and still. I tried calling 911 again. No signal this time. I tried texting my wife. The message wouldn't send. The GPS was still showing my location on that unmarked road, but now it wasn't offering any routes, just showing me stuck on this gray line in the middle of nowhere. A figure stepped out of the car ahead. I saw it in my headlights. A person in dark winter clothes, put up, face hidden. They stood beside the open door, not moving, just facing my car. I couldn't tell if they were looking at me or past me. I checked my rear-view mirror. The car behind me was still there, but now I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting there in the dark. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The road was too narrow to turn around. There was no shoulder, just trees pressed right up to the pavement. I couldn't go forward or back without these other cars moving. The figure ahead started walking toward me. Slow, measured steps. I locked my doors and laid on the horn, hoping to scare them off or attract attention from someone, anyone. The figure kept coming. They walked right up to my driver's side window and stood there, inches from the glass. I still couldn't see their face in the shadow of the hood. They raised one hand and knocked on my window. 3 slow knocks. I shook my head, keeping my hands on the wheel. They knocked again. Same rhythm. 3 deliberate knocks. "Go away!" I shouted through the glass. They tilted their heads slightly, like they were confused by my response. Then they pulled back their hood. It was a woman, maybe 40, with a completely normal face. She smiled at me, pleasant and friendly, like we were neighbors meeting on the street. "Could you roll down your window?" she called through the glass. "I need to ask you something." "No, move your car so I can leave." Her smile didn't fade. "I can't do that. Not until you answer my question. That's the rule." "What rule? What are you talking about?" She glanced back at the car behind me, then to her own vehicle. "Everyone who comes down this road has to answer. That's how it works. Please, just roll down your window. It's really important. I'm calling the police. No signal here. I'm afraid the road doesn't like that." She said it so casually, like it made perfect sense. "Please, I've been waiting so long. I just need you to answer one question, and then you can go." I promise. Something about the way she said, "I've been waiting so long," made my skin crawl. I looked past her at the car blocking the road. The snow on it wasn't just from tonight's storm. It was packed and frozen, the kind that builds up over days or weeks. "How long have you been here?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "I don't remember exactly. Time feels different on this road. But that doesn't matter. What matters is the question. Will you let me ask it?" "No." "Move your car." Her expression hardened. "You don't understand. If you don't answer, you can't leave. You'll be stuck here just like me. Just like him." She gestured to the car behind me. "Just like everyone else who wouldn't answer." I looked in my rearview mirror. The figure in the car behind me was still sitting there, perfectly still. Too still, like a mannequin. "Everyone else?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. She nodded. "The road brings people here. We try to leave, but we can't unless someone answers our question. That's the rule. I've tried driving away. The road just loops back to this spot. I've tried walking through the trees. I always end up back here. The only way out is if someone answers." That's insane. I know how it sounds. She pressed her palm against my window. "But you're here now. You felt something was wrong about this road, didn't you? Before you even turned onto it. But you came anyway, because the GPS told you to. The road wanted you here." I looked at my phone. The GPS was glitching now. My blue dot jumping around randomly. The road on the map was flickering in and out of existence. "What's your question?" I heard myself ask. Her face lit up. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much." She took a breath. "The question is, why did you take this road?" I stared at her. "What? Why did you take this road? Really think about it. Why did you choose to come here?" The GPS told me to. There was traffic on the highway." She shook her head. "No, that's not the real answer. The road only brings people who need to be here. People who are running from something, or looking for something, or hiding something. So I'll ask again. Why did you really take this road?" I wanted to argue, to tell her she was crazy. But something stopped me. The truth was, I could have waited in traffic, could have taken any number of other routes. But when the GPS showed this mysterious road through the forest, I'd felt drawn to it, curious, like part of me wanted to see where it led. "I don't know," I said quietly. "That's not an answer." Her voice had an edge now. "You need to answer the question, the truth, or you'll never leave." I looked around desperately. The snow was piling up on my windshield. The trees seemed to press closer. The road behind me disappeared into darkness. And ahead was just that abandoned car and this woman who claimed she'd been trapped here for how long I was running away. I heard myself say from my life, my job, my marriage, everything. I saw this road and thought maybe it would take me somewhere else, somewhere I could start over. The woman smiled, but it was sad this time. "Thank you. That's the truth, isn't it?" I nodded, feeling tears on my face, without knowing when I'd started crying. "You can go now," she said, stepping back from my car. "You answered. You're free." I looked in my rear-view mirror. The car behind me was gone. Just empty road stretching into darkness. When I looked forward, the woman was walking back to her car. She got in, and the engine started. Her car pulled to the side, barely fitting between the road and the trees, giving me just enough space to pass. As I drove by, I glanced at her. She was crying, her hands gripping the wheel, staring straight ahead. In my mirror, I watched her car pull back onto the road behind me and stopped, blocking it again, waiting for the next person. I drove in silence for another 10 minutes before the road finally met up with a highway. A normal highway with signs and other cars and civilization. My GPS blinked and returned to normal, routing me home like nothing had happened. I never told anyone about that road. What would I say? That I got lost and met a crazy person? That I hallucinated from stress and exhaustion? But sometimes I check the GPS late at night, zooming in on that stretch of forest between highways. The road is never there on the map. Not anymore. Though occasionally, very occasionally, it appears just for a moment, a gray line through the trees. And I wonder how many people have taken it since me. I wonder how many are still there. Last week, I was scrolling through local news and saw a missing person report. A woman who disappeared while driving home from Burlington 6 years ago. Her car was never found. No trace of her on any cameras or toll booths. The photograph showed her face. It was the woman from the road. But that's impossible.